Wow. I'm so lucky to have found an original recording of a young woman pouring herself a glass of water from a bucket and drinking it in 1631 in Norfolk. Really interesting how similar it is to someone drinking water today. Something to think about, isn't it? Hello, and welcome back to the final couplet with me, Theo Cowan. Wow, we are at a very important milestone. It is episode 10, which means Sonnet 10. Exciting times. I think we've had a hell of a roller coaster so far. I, for one, did not expect all of the first 10 sonnets to be so similar. But I think we've made the most of them. And I've had an enjoyable and educational time. What will the next 10 sonnets have in store for us? Maybe one day there will be a sonnet that isn't about forcing a young man to have a child. We can only hope. Now, without further ado, let's dive in to Sonnet 10. Sonnet 10. For shame deny that thou bearest love to any, who for thyself art so unprovident. Grant, if thou wilt, thou art beloved of many, but that thou none lovest is most evident. For thou art so possessed with murderous hate, that gainst thyself thou stickest not to conspire, seeking that beauteous roof to ruinate, which to repair should be thy chief desire. O change thy thought, that I may change my mind. Shall hate be fairer lodged than gentle love? Be as thy presence is, gracious and kind, or to thyself at least kind-hearted prove. Make thee another self for love of me, that beauty still may live in thine or thee. Well, did we expect anything less from Shakespeare's 10th sonnet? Another cracker about making a young man have a child. This time a few new persuasive techniques used. I'd say Shakespeare is really trying to make John feel guilty here. He's even bringing himself into it and how he feels, which is, he doesn't often do that. Has he done that before? I don't think so. So, he's taking it onto a sort of personal level. Right, let's dive in to what this all means, shall we? So, it starts with, for shame deny that thou bearest love to any, who for thyself art so unprovident. So here Shakespeare's saying, if you have any shame, admit that you don't love anyone because you don't have any care for yourself. Which brings to mind the RuPaul quote from Drag Race, which is something along the lines of, if you can't love yourself, how the hell are you going to love anyone else, right? So it's an early version of that, really, I think. Grant, if thou wilt, thou art beloved of many, but that thou none lovest is more evident. So here he's saying, look, a lot of people love you. A lot of people have love for you in your life. But it's pretty evident that you don't love anyone. It's quite amazing. He's just telling him this. Like, loads of people love you, but you don't love anyone. If I was John, I'd be going, don't tell me what I love and what I don't love, you weirdo. For thou art so possessed with murderous hate, that 'gainst thyself thou stickest not to conspire, seeking that beauteous roof to ruinate, which to repair should be thy chief desire. So I had to take, that's good 4 lines there, because it's all one thought really, I think. So this means you're so possessed with murderous hate that you're okay to plot against yourself. You're seeking to destroy the roof or the house that actually you should want to repair. So it's a similar notion to the last few sentences, I'd say. You're saying, you're actually plotting against yourself here. And then uses a nice roofing analogy, which I think is good. Maybe Shakespeare was into building at that point. Maybe he'd done a bit of roofing work on some friends' houses and thought, oh yeah, actually, I'll pop that in my next sonnet. Oh, change thy thought, that I may change my mind. So that's a simple one, just pretty much does what it says on the tin, that one. So change what you're thinking so that I can change my mind about you. Shall hate be fairer lodged than gentle love? So here he's going back to the sort of lodging house analogy that he had earlier. So is hate a nicer place to live than love? Is a house of hate nicer than a lovely home of love? Tell me that. Pretty obvious, isn't it? Be as thy presence is, gracious and kind, or to thyself at least kind-hearted prove. So here he's saying, be more gracious and kind, like how you look. Like you look like a very gracious and kind person. Or, at least be kind-hearted to yourself. At least be kind to yourself. Similar again. I feel like he is repeating himself quite a lot in this one. But again, he's just trying to hammer home the truth, isn't he? And now we're at the final couplet. Make thee another self for love of me, that beauty still may live in thine or thee. Again, make thee another self, that's, have a child. Have a child for love of me, which is interesting. So this is Shakespeare saying, have a child, if for nothing else, because you love me. So your beauty will live on in your children, if not in you yourself, right? Similar message. I think what's most interesting about this is Shakespeare's bringing himself into it. And he's saying, if you love me, you must have a kid. Which is quite an interesting one, isn't it? It really makes you think about John's relationship with Shakespeare and how Shakespeare feels about John. Why is he so desperate for John to have a kid? It's really bizarre. I don't know, man. Shakespeare, something's up here. Something doesn't quite add up. Oh, I wish I could go back and just have a little pint with Shakespeare and go, why the hell were you so obsessed with this guy having a kid? It's really weird, man. Should have left him alone. Or maybe it's not about the kid, it's actually just about love. And Shakespeare loves John, and he has to use the kid analogy as sort of a mask for that. That's something to think about, isn't it? That's very scholarly of me to have got that from the sonnets. And actually, if no one's thought of that before, then that's pretty profound stuff. So you're welcome. You heard it here first. Now let's put this whole thing to our story, shall we? If you remember last week, Shakespeare and Ben Jonson had arrived at John's house to read their latest sonnet, Sonnet 9, and Shakespeare's wife was in the living room with John before they arrived, and she had concealed herself behind the curtain. So that's where we left off. Shakespeare finishes reading Sonnet 9. But before John can respond, Ben Jonson spots Shakespeare's wife's feet poking out of the curtain in the living room. And he says, "Is there someone behind that curtain?" And John says, "Not, don't think so. Don't think so." And Shakespeare says, I can see a pair of feet, so I think there is someone behind there." And he goes over to the curtain and he pulls it back, revealing his wife. Now, Shakespeare can't let on to John that he knows his wife, because John just thinks that Shakespeare's wife is a lovely lady that wants to be with him and for him to have a child. So they stare into each other's eyes. And Shakespeare says, "Hello, do I know you? Why are you hiding behind the curtain?" And Shakespeare's wife, quickly thinking on her feet, starts tapping the windows and says, "Yeah, just checking there. All right, they all look in order. And I think you're good to go, John. Is there anything else you want me to look at?" And John says, "Nope, that'll be all. Thank you very much, my lady. You know your way out, don't you?" And she says, "Yes. Anyway, lovely to meet you two gentlemen." And John says, "Oh, yes, sorry, how rude of me. This is the renowned playwright William Shakespeare and his friend Ben Jonson." Ben Jonson and William Shakespeare bow to Shakespeare's wife as she leaves the room. And when she's left, Shakespeare says, What was she doing?" And John said, "Oh, just checking the windows. This new job that they've given women in London, that they just go round houses and check windows. So, yeah. But everything seems in order, so that's good." And Shakespeare says, "Great. What did you think of the sonnet?" And John says, "Oh, shut up. I hated it. Stop making me have kids. It's pathetic, the pair of you. Get out." And Bill and Ben leave with their tails between their legs. Shakespeare gets home to his house and his wife is waiting for him. And he says, "Well, how did it go? That was a close shave, wasn't it?" And she says, "It was. Do you think he noticed that we knew each other?" And Shakespeare said, No, I'm a brilliant actor, so I covered it well. I've been taking improvisation classes recently, so you might have been able to tell." And she said, "Well, it was me that came up with the window thing." So he said, "Yeah, but it was really, you could see in my eyes that I was telling you what to do." She said, "Yeah, all right. Anyway, I think we got away with it. Why were you coming round to his house anyway? You knew that I'd be there reading the sonnet to him. What were you doing? And Shakespeare said, sorry, I got a bit carried away. Bill came round and... Oh no, I'm Bill. Ben came round. Sorry. I forget my own name sometimes. Ben came round and we got a bit drunk and we thought, wouldn't it be a good idea to run round to John's house and read him the latest sonnet that I wrote. She said, that's annoying because it sort of ruined the moment that I was having with John. I thought I was getting through to him. And Shakespeare said, really? Well, what happened when you read him Sonnet 8 then? And she said, well, I just think that he was maybe listening a bit more than he has done. Now, Shakespeare's wife, of course, isn't telling Shakespeare the full truth here, because John had said, after she had read Sonnet 8, that he would have a child, but only with her. And she has decided not to tell William Shakespeare about this. And Shakespeare says, well, I guess we've just got to keep breaking him down until he has a kid, eh? And Shakespeare's wife says, yep, I guess we do. That night, they're both in bed. Shakespeare is awake, wide awake, and he's thinking about John. Recently, he has been thinking that maybe his love for John is more than friendship. Could he be falling for this man? He goes up to his writing room and pens Sonnet 10. He pours his heart into this sonnet. And he's so giddy after writing it that he creeps out of the house and walks along the cobbled London streets that were lit only by the pale moonlight. Eventually he arrived at John's house. He got some little pebbles off the street and started throwing them one by one at John's window. The window opened. It wasn't John. It was a random bloke. And he said, what the bloody hell are you doing? It's 3 a.m. And Shakespeare says, oh, sorry, wrong window. He realises that John's house is the one next door. So he gets some more pebbles and he throws them at that window. Eventually, the window opens and John says, who is it? And Shakespeare says, it's me, William Shakespeare. And John says, oh, it's 3 a.m, Shakespeare. What are you doing? And Shakespeare says, look, I've got another sonnet to read to you. And before you say anything, I just want to read it to you, because it might shed some light on my feelings. And John says, is it about me having a kid? And Shakespeare says, listen, I can't deny that it will have elements of that, but there's also some underlying stuff, so you're going to have to sort of read between the lines a little bit. And John says, oh, fine. Read it to me. But you're not coming in. You'll have to read it from the street. And Shakespeare retrieves Sonnet 10 from his back pocket and reads Sonnet 10. If you have any shame, admit that you don't have love for anyone else, because you don't have any love for yourself. Look, loads of people love you, alright? I admit it. But it's really obvious that you don't love anyone back. You are so possessed by murderous hate that you are harming yourself. You're trying to destroy the house that you should be repairing. Oh, change your way of thinking so that I can change how I feel about you. Should hate have a really fancy house, whilst love has a really horrible one? You look really nice and kind, so why don't you act like that? Or at least be kind to yourself. Have a kid because you love me, so your beauty will live on in your kids, if not in you. Wow, that was a heavy hitter. Got quite emotional, that, didn't it, towards the end? Wonder how John takes it. Let's find out next week. Until then, have a lovely time. Goodbye.